This is uRoutine's You Are Infinite podcast, the show where host Ed Johnson explores the daily habits, routines and stories of world-class thinkers and doers. Each week you'll hear from experts who share small practices that fuel big results. Hit subscribe and let's jump into today's episode.
Today's guest is someone who embodies resilience, reinvention and relentless personal growth. Simon is a seasoned HR professional with over 30 years of experience across global giants like GSK, Coca-Cola and NCR. He's a coach, mentor to over 30 people internationally, and now a proud grandfather who's as passionate about mentoring CFOs as he is about walking 10,000 steps, more on that a bit later on, to manage his diabetes. From growing up on a council estate and being diagnosed with learning difficulties, to leading award-winning mentoring programs and pioneering HR transformations, Simon proves that routines, smart goals, and a little bit of technology can turn passion and drive into tangible results. Welcome to the show, Simon.
Thanks, Ed. Good morning to you, and thanks indeed for inviting me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Likewise, there's a lot to get into here, a lot to unpack. I'm really excited about it. Simon, I've just given a bit of an overview there, but in your own words, tell me a bit about that journey from, as you describe yourself, a shy child diagnosed with learning difficulties, I think at the age of 5, to an impressive career that you subsequently had.
I was born in Nottingham on a large council estate. At the time, I think it was the largest council estate in Europe. I was quite a slow developer. You know, for example, I couldn't walk until I was 2, and either I couldn't talk or I didn't want to talk until I was 4. At school, when they called out the register at infant school, I never answered my name. So my father was teaching me at home to say, "Yes, Miss Ward," but I never did. So by the time I was 6, the school had diagnosed that I had learning difficulties. So I was put into the special class for reading and for writing, and I struggled, to be honest. I did struggle, and that followed through really until the age of 10 and 11. In those days we used to have something called the 11 plus, which some of the older listeners may be aware of, and it actually is a way of segregating education between grammar schools and secondary modern schools. So not surprisingly, I failed my 11 plus and went to a secondary modern school. Some of the aspects of that meant that you didn't get the opportunity to do O-levels. You couldn't learn a language like French, and certainly you didn't learn Latin, which I know is perhaps not quite so relevant for some people. So yeah, I was there, and only at about age 13 did it kick into me that, what am I doing? Where am I going? What's this all about? And that was a kind of stimulus, because I found myself in the bike sheds with the skinheads and the greasers, and all the talk was about smoking or other substance abuse. And I thought, well, do I want this? And I came to the conclusion that this isn't the only way. There are alternative routes. So then I started getting interested in subjects. So at school I had a mentor who was a really good English teacher, and I became quite interested in writing and describing things and describing my life. By that time I could read and write, by the way. And also I became very interested in art as well. And it's quite encouraging, when I got an A for art and a B- for English. I mean, when everything else was a D, it was quite encouraging to get those grades. So that's really when my achievement motive kicked in. And, I'll sort of fast forward a little bit, because when I left Nottingham, we got moved with the family. First of all, we got moved to Coventry. We were saying my dad was sent to Coventry, and then later we got moved to the south of England, I found again that I was into this academic scenario where every time I moved school, I was doing a different syllabus. So, for example, I'd studied A-level English, history and geography, but halfway through the A-levels we moved, and then I was studying a different set of books for English, history and geography. In a way, that was kind of like a potential barrier, but it sort of really stimulated me to say, no, I'm going to do this. I'm still going to pass these A-levels, even though, you know, the books we're reading in Shakespeare are completely different, and even though the period in history we're studying is very different. So yeah, this is really how I sort of became more achievement motivated. And as we know, there's sort of three main motivators David McLennan has written about. One is achievement motive, another one is affiliation, the need to be socially accountable or accepted or to fit in to a community, and the third one is power, you know, which can either be used in a negative way for status or control, or hopefully in a positive way for influencing good and good values and helping and enabling people. So yeah, for me, achievement was the main motive at that stage, and my career sort of went quite fortunately from working in a factory and loading lorries to actually getting into training. So my first, if you like, professional job was working as a training officer in London, in central London. That required a bit of a routine because I had to get up at 6 in the morning, leave home at 20 past 6 to catch the 6:45 train into London, and then I had to walk from Oxford Street to the office, getting in there nice and early, before 9 o'clock, which was good. Gave me a little bit of extra time to get my bearings before the day began. So yeah, that's where I got into. This is where I started getting interested in helping people and working with people by training people. So I ran onboarding programs, I ran supervisor programs, and I learned technically how to teach people to do things. In this particular case, we were in the dental industry, so I was teaching people how to use a drill, you know, for fillings, and how to use a scaler, you know, to remove the things you don't want to have on your teeth. So yeah, from there I got into HR as a career. I found not only was it achievement motivating, but there's positive power in being able to help and enable other people, and also there's a sense of belonging, you know, to belong to a large organisation. My sort of social aspects encouraged me to join the cooperative society, you know, which is very much about collaboration and cooperation and being part of a community. And I went from being a training officer in the dental sector industry into working in retail and doing recruitment and training. So I was working actually for the Co-op dairy, and so I was recruiting milk people into their roles and people to work in bottling halls. Got me involved in a lot of change because the dairy industry was changing, moving from doorstep delivery to supermarket, moving from bottles to cartons, and so I was involved in a lot of change relating to that. I moved on, and I tended to get to join big brands in my career, so I had a few lucky breaks there. Unigate Dairies headhunted me from the cooperative dairies, and they became Dairy Crest, which a lot of people know today. And then I moved on to other organisations, including Duracell. So I think most people know about the drumming bunny of Duracell. And then from there I moved into pharmaceuticals, actually, and consumer healthcare with GlaxoSmithKline. Talk a bit more about some examples of how that relates to routines and helping people a bit later on. So as you mentioned at the beginning, I was lucky enough to go from my starting situation to becoming an HR director, for Europe, an HR director for EMEA, and also a global HR leadership team member as well. So that was my career up until about 14 years ago, where I took the leap into self-employment. So a bit of a pioneering piece there, and working for myself and building my own business and building the brand, which I really enjoyed doing. And I'm doing quite a lot of work in consulting, helping organisations with their change challenges, helping HR functions to become more effective and more enabling, and also doing quite a lot of work in coaching and mentoring as well, which is bringing me up to date of where I am now.
Really impressive sort of career history there, Simon, and you've obviously achieved so much during that time. You describe yourself as, I was reading this earlier, scattergun ideas person and dreamer, and I love that. And I think a lot of people probably can relate to that. There'll be people who've got ideas, they will maybe think, I'd love to start a business, or I wish I could do this, or whatever it is that they're dreaming about doing. You described yourself as that until you discovered motivating goals and accountability. Can you tell me about that moment? And you've sort of alluded to it in your childhood, but can you tell me about that moment a bit more when that shift truly clicked for you, and whether there were additional sort of shifts throughout your career where that happened?
Yes, I think in a sense we're all on this continuum, aren't we, between being heavily structured and in a role where the world is determined for us, and being a true entrepreneur or an artist. And so we're all on that continuum. In my early life, as you heard, I wasn't particularly interested in academic things, but when I was in the bike sheds and I thought, well, I don't really want to be here, I started thinking, well, I've got to work at this. It doesn't just happen. I've got to work at this, and the way to do that is to study and have some routines and do those things on a regular basis. So that was when I sort of first discovered things like routines and swotting and studying, knowing that I had to do that because it didn't come naturally to me to do the academic stuff. When I was at university, I was really interested in the fact I had a lot of free time. We only had 9 lectures a week, and so the rest of the time we could self-determine what we had, and a lot of it is around social activities. I became the author and editor of the university poetry magazine, because I was interested in, as you heard earlier, English and art a lot, and had various stimulus as well through the studies we were doing to be more creative. So that was a sort of creative area. But I always realised there's going to be a balance here. Do I actually want to get a degree, or am I just having fun drinking and meeting people and writing poetry? And I soon discovered that although I had about 20 poems published, I wasn't going to make a living out of it. I think after 20 poems I realised I'd earned £300, and that was over a year, so not going to earn a living on that. So I had to think about working at something, and that's how I, as I told you earlier, got into the co-op and other organisations. So yeah, it has been a balance, and I think when I started my own business, that was the second occasion where I was looking at this balance between, being on the payroll. Every month you're going to get a certain salary. There's certain rules you've got to follow. There's a boss you've got to work for, so sort of highly structured environment, and I sort of rebelled a little bit against being over-managed and over-controlled. Unfortunately, I had a manager who liked to control, a bit of a micro-manager. Didn't suit me, so I thought, well, the best way to move forward is to become my own boss, hence moving into this area. So the sort of dreamer, idealist, butterfly mind or scattergun approach has been there from the beginning, and has been sort of monitored perhaps or complemented when I realised that actually, if you want to create a good habit, you have to follow certain routines. Ideally, they're routines that you develop for yourself rather than routines that are imposed upon you.
I suppose it's that awareness of being a dreamer, for example, combined with then how you can combat that with, as you've said, routines and commitment that are so important.
Yeah.
On that, Simon, what's one personal routine, maybe something surprisingly simple, that you would say has had a dramatic impact on your professional success and well-being?
And there are two topics there, professional success and well-being. I'll start with well-being because for me that comes first. You know, if you do a list of what's most important to you in your life, for me it's health. Because if you've got good health, then you have the freedom to do some of those other things. If you've got bad health, then it's going to limit your ability to do those other things. So in my 40s, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And initially I was sort of in denial about this, but I found that I had low energy, I couldn't concentrate, you know, I was feeling very tired, and so it took me a while to get there, but I realised that, you know, this can either control me or I can control it. So a simple routine that I set was to say, well, look, let's set myself some goals in terms of my health. Simple things like go walking, you know, drink water, eat the right things, so not too many curries, you know, on a Friday night, not too much to drink, everything in moderation really. Relatively simple if you want to do it, you know, and of course there's a stimulus there. Do I want to live, you know, to a good age, or do I want to find that I'm wheelchair bound and you know, die early of diabetes related issues? My mother had actually had diabetes and ended up in a wheelchair and couldn't see, and you know, couldn't feel their legs, etc. So there's kind of consequence and incentive, but the simple routine is just to do it every day. So that's what I do, you know, and when you've got a reason for wanting to do it every day, it's easy. If somebody is imposing it on you and say you must do this, like the doctors were saying initially, I thought, oh no, I can get by. But I soon realised that who owns this? You know, it's my health, it's my body, it's me that owns this. So that will be a sort of wellness, simple routine that I've got into, and I find very easy now because it's a habit. Professionally, one thing I've found is if you're working with other people, which in most professions you are, whether they be colleagues or clients, the key thing is to have regular contact with them. So to get into a routine of meeting regularly. Because what I've initially found was that if you leave it too long between when you meet somebody, you spend the first hour catching up on what you've been doing in the last 3 years. And therefore you've lost the opportunity to say, so what are we doing now and what can we do moving forward? So professionally, I got into a routine when I became a manager to have regular one-to-ones with my team. Check-ins, really. How are you today? And even though it was a virtual team, because I had people all over Europe, I could WhatsApp, what's the weather like in Athens today, or how's things going in Berlin, and have a dialogue with people, and sort of create a bit of a social network. So that's quite a simple thing to do, to actually have one-to-ones regularly. I found that in mentoring as well, because I'm a mentor, and I find that if you meet every month for at least an hour, you make far more progress than if there's no structure to your mentoring relationship. So a bit of formality keeps you on track, keeps the momentum going, and keeps you informed actually as to where that other person's at, because otherwise they could be going on a different journey to what you knew was their journey before. And I found that really works because it enables you to help them make progress, and in the case of the work context, to keep close to them, so ensure that they're engaged and that they can give of their best in the work context. So yeah, they would be my two simple routines for wellness and professional life.
On that, you started to talk about teams there. I know that you've helped build really high-performing teams. You've mentored across different cultures. You've helped thousands of people through the process of layoffs. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people in a lot of roles, and particularly with the rise of AI, I think a number of people will be feeling that there is uncertainty in their careers. But uncertainty sort of goes with the territory of one's career and the roller coaster of life, I suppose. How do you use structure and support systems and routines, perhaps, to keep people motivated and to keep people resilient during that uncertainty?
Contact, regular contact, social interaction. How are you today? How are you feeling? What's on your mind? Those kind of discussions. Keeps the dialogue open. I have found that there's a lot of fear around AI with some individuals, and then it's a question of having a discussion about, what can you control, what can you influence, and what's outside of your control. So let's focus on things that we can control, let's focus on things we can influence, and let's let go of the things that are outside of our control. I mean, I had a similar scenario because 25 years ago there was something called Y2K, and it was all about, in the year 2000, all the computers would explode because they weren't programmed to have the year 2000 in them. So there was this sort of nightmare scenario that at the end of 1999, all the technology in the world would just collapse. It never happened. I think a lot of IT consultants made a lot of money over that particular fear. And so here we are in a similar scenario about the threat of AI. For me, I take a positive view. I see that AI can be an enabler rather than a threat. And all through history, there's been changes. If you go back to the start of the Industrial Revolution, there were the Luddite riots because somebody invented a weaving machine that could make wool and cloth a lot quicker than by hand, and there were riots against that. But here we are. We've worked through that situation in 1832, and we're still here. So my view is that AI can be an enabler. It can do, for example, it can do drafts, and then you can take those drafts, add a little bit of empathy, humility, and humour, and turn something which has saved you hours into something which really becomes quite impactful. As an example, I'm writing an HR book at the moment based on my HR career with a colleague who lives in Ireland, and I wrote 10 chapters of the book using Microsoft Copilot. It took me an hour and a half, because if you know what probing questions to ask or prompting questions to ask, AI will search, the memory bank and all the content that's ever been written and come up with something quite succinct. Okay, it lacks a bit of humility, it lacks a bit of humour, it lacks empathy, but it's quite easy to edit it. So what would have taken probably 6 months took an hour and a half, and now with my colleague we're going in there and just peppering it, with some flavour and spice, so that it becomes something that people want to read. So I like to see that. I mean, there's always the nightmare scenario that James Bond's villain is going to take over the world, and I think you do have to have some structure and some governance and some control. So for me, AI with ethics, is an important combination, and to have some governance around how you use AI, and to perhaps make sure that AI is working for us rather than we're working for AI. So I think a lot depends on the perspective, and I think if you can have discussions with people about what's within your control, what can you influence, and what's completely outside of your control, don't worry about that bit, then you can come to terms with these events. So yeah, I use AI on a daily basis, as you've heard. I like apps which you can carry around on your mobile phone. I think it's very convenient. When I started my career, we didn't even have laptops, so computers were these big beasts, with a television screen which went back about 2 feet, and you couldn't carry it around anywhere. And mobile phones were like bricks, Motorola bricks. So, as we've gone and as we've evolved in a positive way, I think you can use things like AI and apps in a convenient way.
And you definitely embrace technology, Simon. For anybody who knows you, I think they'll know that you talk a lot about the technology that you use on LinkedIn. You're an advocate of apps. You're building, am I right in thinking that you're building an AI people manager app at the moment? Talk about that and share a bit about that if you can.
Again, it's a little bit entrepreneurial, but what I noticed over my career is that there's this relationship between HR and line managers, but the real most important relationship is between line managers and their employees. People join companies and they leave managers if those managers are not effective. So this app that we're looking at is all about how do we equip the line manager with some easy-to-use tips for their daily work with their employees, so that they don't have to, wait until HR is available to give them an answer. They can own the answer themselves. So it's all about tips for line managers. We just started this. It's called Smart Manager, and we're just in this prototype stage, and we're in the stage where we're looking at what is most important for line managers. So we've developed a focus group, looking at all of the HR processes from hire to retire, to find out which ones would be most useful for line managers to have some AI tips on their mobile phone. And so we're just doing the research for that now. And the balance to that is to also collaborate with HR, because similar to what you mentioned about the AI threat to our jobs, we don't want a scenario where HR say, well, you're replacing HR with an app, so line managers don't need HR anymore. No, we're freeing up HR from answering routine questions that they have to answer, twice a day, to be able to work at a higher level, on things like diversity and inclusion, strategic workforce planning, employee engagement and experience. So again, positioning this as something that's not a threat to HR, but it's an enabler both for HR and for line managers. So it's in the early stages, but happy to talk about it in other contexts as we go forward. but it's good fun.
Really exciting to be at that phase where you're building. And I suppose part of that you're going to be setting goals for as well. Talk a bit more about SMART goals and your personal sort of goal tracking system that you use,
Right.
and maybe accountability in there as well. How do you get things done?
And I think it is important to be able to have something which is measurable, because otherwise how do you know whether you've achieved it? And also to be able to describe it. So this is where the specific piece comes in. One thing I have learned, though, is it's important to make sure that your goals are actually achievable. You know, a lot of people set New Year's resolutions, but are they realistic? You know, are they achievable? I think the research shows that only about 8% of people follow through on those resolutions. So, you know, one thing I've learnt is set stretching goals that make sure they're actually achievable. So sometimes you can say that do baby steps rather than giant leaps, or find quick wins rather than set something which is really intensive and it's like climbing Mount Everest, you know, to actually achieve anything. So milestones, quick wins, realistic are the key things for me. And yes, of course, I use apps. I use uRoutine, so I've got 5 goals on uRoutine. And what's good there is that you get reminders. So sometimes you can forget things, you know, particularly if let's say you've gone to a concert and you get fascinated by that, or you're out in the countryside on a nice walk, you can forget things. So when your phone clicks and says, in 1 hour's time you have a goal to meet and record, uRoutine does that, and that helps me, you know, with my health goals, and also with my sort of creative goals as well, such as writing an HR book or designing a new app, or trying to get my poetry published. Some of those are easier to achieve than you might think, and some of those I have to achieve, such as my health. But yeah, I think the app is good. I think it's a regular reminder, and I've tried to set goals which are actually achievable. I know some people struggle with SMART, you know, and find it, this is a bit of a straitjacket that's being imposed upon me. I've always thought that the best way to have goals is to own them yourself and set your own goals, or do goal setting with somebody. So it becomes like a joint accountability. You know, so you know, for example, with your partner, set goals that both of you can achieve, or set goals that the other person can give you feedback on. And so that's been sort of quite an important learning for me. So yeah, big fan of apps. I measure my steps every day on an app. I measure my blood sugar levels every day on an app, and I measure my goals every day on uRoutine.
And I love what you said there about making sure that those goals are achievable, and it not having to be something sort of so big and therefore something that people don't feel they can achieve, like New Year's resolutions, where, as you say, only 8 or 10% of them, I think, in various studies, are actually achieved. Yeah. Those small incremental steps, that daily, weekly routine, those habits that are so important. For anybody listening right now who's feeling stuck, maybe overwhelmed, feeling like they've got a number of goals but they're a bit scattered, or they're demotivated or discouraged, what would you say is the most powerful piece of advice to help those people to start building a life-changing routine?
Yeah, so I think, as you say, if you're in this zone where you fear things, or you feel stuck, or you feel that the world is controlling you, you know, AI and global warming and wars are controlling you, I think it's good just to think about grounding yourself in terms of who are you, what do you stand for, to know yourself first. You know, first know yourself before setting out on your journey. It's the same as having a map for your journey or having a compass for your journey, but know where you are. Where am I starting from first? So I think don't limit yourself. Don't let others impose boundaries on you, or perceptions or social media impose boundaries on you. Know yourself, know what you're capable of, know what you can do. Also find your passion, because what I've discovered is that if you believe in it and if you really want it, you can do it. So what is it that gets you up in the morning? What is it that incentivizes you? What is it that turns you on? Choose those things to work on, because we tend to be good at the things that motivate us. And of course, we get better the more we practice those things. So yeah, I think in summary I would say don't limit yourself, know yourself, hold yourself accountable, because if you don't write down what you want to achieve, which perhaps on New Year's Eve we don't write it down because we've had too many drinks, if you don't write it down, then it's difficult to remember it and to keep track of it. So this is where uRoutine has come in. So I would say find your passion, don't limit yourself, be accountable, and I think last but not least is tell others, because a goal shared is far more effective, and it holds you accountable. Last week you said that you want to write poetry. How are you getting on with that? Is better than nobody even knowing that you want to write poetry. So yeah, keep it simple, and they're the key things that I'd share.
Fantastic. Some really good advice there, Simon. Thank you. Well, Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. Some really brilliant insights, some fascinating learnings about your really impressive career and the journey that you've been on so far. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Ed. It's been a pleasure.